Academic writing demands that you take a firm position on complex issues, but it simultaneously forbids you from telling the reader what you personally believe. Consider the difference between these two statements. On the left, I think the government shouldn't control businesses. On the right, from an economic perspective, strict government intervention is an unlikely approach to achieving market stability. Phrases like I think or in my view signal that the conclusion is based on internal feelings rather than external evidence. They isolate the argument to a single author rather than anchoring it to verifiable facts. Experienced researchers do not state their opinions. Instead, they encode what are called stance and perspective directly into the architectural vocabulary of their sentences. Mastering this register requires translating your subjective viewpoints into a rigorous, structural system of persuasion. Every strong academic argument augurates on a two-part matrix: perspective and stance. The perspective is the specific lens through which an issue is analyzed. It establishes the strict parameters of the discussion. A single event can be evaluated in entirely different ways. The perspective lens filters the available data, dictating whether an issue is being judged on economic viability, political feasibility, or ethical grounds. Stance is the writer's evaluated position within that specific lens. It is the conclusion reached after the parameters are set. Unlike a raw opinion, a stance is the direct result of synthesizing evidence and information. Looking at this photograph of a UN assembly session, we can see exactly why this matters. High-stakes global decisions, like relocating a manufacturing base or addressing climate change, are navigated by systematically weighing competing perspectives to form a defensible stance. Separating the parameters of the discussion from the ultimate evaluation is the essential prerequisite for constructing a credible academic voice. Let's build one of these arguments from the ground up. The first step is declaring the boundaries of the claim. We begin with a root word like geography. To establish the analytical lens, this generates several syntactic options: an adjective-noun pairing like a geographical institution, an adverb like geographically speaking, or a prepositional phrase like from a geographical perspective. These structures are deliberately placed at the beginning of a sentence. They frame everything that follows. Explicitly setting the perspective protects the writer. Evaluating a policy purely from an economic perspective neutralizes counterarguments based on military or cultural grounds. Once the perspective is set, the writer needs a structural foundation for the claim itself, the academic noun. Academic texts rarely analyze simple, physical actions. They analyze complex, abstract concepts. This textbook excerpt highlights frequent structural nouns: strategy, approach, concept, solution, position, and policy. Instead of writing about what a company is doing, an expert writes about its strategy. As seen in these definitions, each noun requires lexical precision to accurately label abstract ideas. These abstract nouns serve as stable, objective anchors. They create a firm grammatical subject to which the writer can attach their evaluation. With the anchor in place, the writer can now execute the core mechanism of academic persuasion, the adjective-noun collocation. By attaching a carefully chosen evaluative adjective to the abstract noun, the author successfully injects a precise subjective judgment into the text. Starting with the noun strategy, the writer attaches the adjective central to form the collocation central strategy. Or, swapping the variables, snapping unlikely to the front produces an unlikely approach. A final variation, attaching influential to position, creates an influential position. The differences here are stark. Labeling something a practical solution is an endorsement. Labeling it an unlikely approach is a sharp critical rejection. The writer has issued a powerful verdict, all without ever using a first-person pronoun. These precise collocations are the primary vehicles for delivering subjective evaluation under the guise of objectivity. The final layer of sentence construction is calibrating the exact strength of that stance. This is achieved through stance adverbials, which tell the reader exactly how confident the writer is in their own evaluation. Adding another layer to our text editor, we see the tools for this modulation: apparently, clearly, without doubt, and in theory. If the data is incontrovertible, the writer deploys without doubt. If the evidence is speculative, they soften the claim with in theory or apparently. Adverbials act as a volume dial. They allow researchers to assert degrees of certainty while maintaining the necessary professional distance from the text. Let's apply this structural framework to a published academic text to see the mechanics in action. This textbook paragraph discusses infrastructure development in emerging economies. On the surface, it reads as a dense, authoritative recitation of fact, stating that infrastructure is unlikely to be created through a market-based approach because developing countries lack sufficient infrastructure to adopt it. But by executing an autopsy on the text, the underlying matrix becomes visible. First, we identify the perspective parameters. The author is analyzing this issue specifically through a market-based approach and a free market approach. Next, we isolate the structural anchors, the academic nouns carrying the argument: infrastructure, planning, and intervention. Finally, we reveal the author's hidden subjectivity by isolating the evaluative language: unlikely, simply do not have, sufficient, and requires. This lexical matrix exposes the author's underlying opposition to the free market approach, a series of subjective judgments hidden beneath an authoritative surface. For reading comprehension, you can cut through dense academic prose by immediately scanning for adjective-noun collocations. That is where the author's true stance resides. For active writing, it provides a replicable, modular formula. Choose a perspective lens, establish an academic noun, and attach an evaluative adjective or adverbial. Academic authority relies on the precise linguistic mechanics of objective persuasion. It's the technical process of turning personal conviction into a verifiable structural claim.